I'm addressing the President Biden. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace.
A historic address to the U.S. Congress, the president of Ukraine's plea for help in the fight against Russia. The new moves the United States is making to provide aid as Russian forces target more civilians. Pope Francis continues his push for peace during a video call with the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Parental consent, informed consent, all of that, yes, is under threat by this referendum.
Battle lines are drawn between pro-life and pro-abortion forces in Michigan. Life After Roe debate in the states. Our deep dive continues into what could happen around the country should Roe v. Wade be overturned. And great sacrifices two Catholics made that have put them on the path to sainthood. EWTN News In Depth starts now. The casualties are mounting as invading Russian forces continue to rain down bombs in cities in eastern Ukraine. Apartment complexes, hospitals, schools barely left standing. Many buildings reduced to rubble. While more than 3 million Ukrainians have sought refuge in neighboring countries, there are still hundreds of thousands trapped in Ukraine. On Friday morning, missiles struck near an airport in the city of Lviv in far west Ukraine near the border of Poland. Several missiles hit an aircraft repair plant, where there are no reports of casualties. In the besieged city of Mariupol, a search for survivors after heavy airstrikes hit a theater where hundreds of civilians were sheltered. Some people were lucky enough to walk away unharmed. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. The war in Ukraine is entering its fourth week. President Biden called China's President Xi Jinping Friday morning to discuss cutting off Russia with sanctions and a ban on military supplies for Russia. It's not clear if Xi agreed on any steps to penalize Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to lead his people, remaining in his country, but he continues to ask for international aid.
Peace in your country doesn't depend anymore only on you and your people. It depends on those next to you. Today, the Ukrainian people are defending not only Ukraine. We are fighting for the values of Europe and the world.
Zelensky's historic virtual address to Congress on Wednesday was met with applause as he urged the U.S. to provide a united front against Russia, alluding to the idea that a threat to freedom anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere, and that this war threatens Western values. Zelensky's address is one of many he's making to world leaders. He also reached out to Canada, Germany, and the United Kingdom, among others, each speech tailored to each country, as he channels their national heroes and invokes their unique histories, including their triumphs and their wounds.
Remember September the 11th. No one else expected it. You could not stop it. Our country experience the same every day, right now.
The personalized messages come with a request for military aid, a closure of airspace over Ukraine, and more economic sanctions for Russia. The United States is airlifting tons of weapons, including 100 Switchblade drones, as part of a new $800 million weapons package to Ukraine. The House voted to suspend normal trade relations with Russia and Belarus, preparing for President Biden to enact higher tariffs on more products. The U.S. has already shut off importation of Russian oil, gas, seafood, alcohol, and diamonds. U.S. officials are in the process of evaluating potential war crimes by Russia. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, thanked Americans for standing with Ukraine this week. She joined Archbishop Boris Gudziak of the Ukrainian Archeparchy of Philadelphia to discuss the growing humanitarian crisis as more people flee the war. Markarova said they need more financial, military, and material support.
American people are with Ukrainian people. And help in any way possible, any help is important now and very, very much appreciated. If you can help with donations, do that. If you can help with welcoming some of the refugees, we're very grateful for that.
Archbishop Gudziak also asks Americans to welcome refugees. and to continue to pray for peace. Pope Francis continued his push for peace during a video call with Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill Wednesday afternoon. It's the first known communication between the two Christian leaders since the start of the war. During the call, Francis rejected the concept of a just war, a concept that Kirill has supported, describing the conflict as a struggle against sin. A Vatican statement said that both men agreed that the Church should avoid political language and use the language of Jesus. Pope Francis added that they are shepherds of the same holy people and that they must unite in an effort to aid peace. The Holy Father has a long-term goal of improving relations with the Russian Orthodox Church. Francis and Kirill have only met once at the Havana airport in 2016 to sign a religious unity declaration. It was the first encounter between a pope and a Russian patriarch in more than 1,000 years. During his general audience earlier on Wednesday, Pope Francis read an impassioned prayer for God's mercy for all of those impacted by the war in Ukraine. The prayer used imagery of the war in asking for forgiveness and for God's intervention to stop the violence. The Holy Father also used biblical images of Noah's flood when discussing the fear of the possibility of a nuclear war that he said would extinguish us. Pope Francis will consecrate Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary at the end of the month during the celebration of penance on Friday, March 25th. The same act on the same day will be carried out in Fatima by Cardinal Krajewski, who was one of the two papal envoys sent to Ukraine last week. And as the Church prepares for the consecration of Russia and Ukraine, the Pilgrim Virgin statue of Our Lady of Fatima traveled from Portugal to leave Ukraine. Lviv Archbishop Wozniak requested the presence of the statue, which carries a message of peace and love. It's a replica of the original at the Portuguese Marian Shrine and will remain in Lviv for 1 month. In Russia, the Catholic Church leaders have led vigils and held adoration of the Blessed Sacrament and called for prayers for peace in the wake of the escalating violence in Ukraine by Russian forces. Catholics are a minority in Russia, numbering about 800,000. That's about half of 1% of the total population of 144 million. 4 Roman Catholic dioceses and 1 apostolic prefecture, which is a diocese in the making, are home to our fellow Catholics in Russia. You can see them indicated on this map. A Roman Catholic priest and Vicar General for the Archdiocese of the Mother of God at Moscow is Father Kirill Gorbanov. I spoke with him about the current situation. Father Kirill Gorbanov, thank you for joining us from Moscow. What has been the reaction of the Russian Catholic bishops to the military operation in Ukraine?
Well, the bishop issued a statement and they said that they are deeply shaken and terrified by this military action. So it's like a reality we have not expected. And they invite all the faithful to pray together for immediate end of this bloodshed.
And as a spokesman for the Russian Bishops' Conference, you said that Catholics are grieving, angered, and bewildered by the military action in Ukraine. Can you tell us more?
I can say that, Catholics in Russia, as well as people in general in Russia, have different opinions about what's going on. Russia is living in its own informational bubble, so not all people have access to the full information about what's going on in Ukraine. But regardless of political opinions, I think everyone is terrified by the fact that Russians and Ukrainians are shooting at each other. And I think that everyone agrees that this has to be stopped now.
War is terrifying and the casualties are great. More than 3 million Ukrainians have fled the country as refugees. Most headed to Poland and to other European countries. But the United Nations says that more than 100,000 refugees have gone into Russia. What is the Catholic Church in Russia doing to help them?
Well, the Catholic Church in Russia is a very tiny minority, so we have less than 1%, less even than 0.5% of the population. And our charitable funds, Caritas in the first place, is ready to do whatever they can to help the refugees, and the bishops have called to reassess all our programs to identify people who are in need, most of the need. But there is not much that we can do, but we will do whatever we can.
We know that economic sanctions are a part of that. They're impacting the people of Russia. Can you tell us how citizens are dealing with that impact?
Well, right now it's not the impact itself, but the expectations that are frightening people, because still, at least in Moscow, you cannot see the difference very much. But of course, people, especially elderly people who remember very well difficult times of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, where there was no food in the supermarkets. So they are very much afraid that this can happen again. And so the mood is quite nervous, I would say, and sad.
It's kind of the fear of the anticipation of what's to come. On March 25th, Pope Francis is going to consecrate Ukraine and Russia to our Blessed Mother. What hope does this bring to Catholics on both sides of this conflict, as you said, without taking political opinions?
I believe that the most important thing that we can do as Catholics is to pray together, because when we start talking about our opinions, this can divide us even further. But when we start to pray, then God will bring us closer to each other. And our faithful here in Russia already for some time are even, I would say, demanding from the bishops to make this act of consecration of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And it was such a joy and relief to hear that the Holy Father himself decided to do just that. And this is a source of great unity and great consolation for all of us.
The Holy Father has asked everyone to participate, every bishop. He sent out a letter here for the U.S. bishops. Is that what you're expecting as well in Russia?
Of course, yes, we will. Here in Moscow, we will come together in our cathedral with our bishop, and I am sure that all the other bishops in their cathedrals will do the same. We have 4 dioceses here in Russia, and that all the faithful who can on this work day come to the church will do that, or accompany us in prayer on the internet.
And will we see unity with the Russian Orthodox Church with that as well?
Well, the Russian Orthodox Church has always was suspicious towards the Fatima apparitions, and especially the part about the conversion of Russia in answer to the Catholic's prayer, and we can understand this. But I think that many people will understand that this initiative comes from the very best intention for Russia, not for to convert Russia into the Catholic Church, but to make a step together towards God and towards unity.
Father Kirill, you mentioned the Russian bubble. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the Russian Catholic perspective on what's happening in Ukraine that you think is missing from the public discussions? Well,
it's just important to understand that people in Russia have a very a picture in their heads of this conflict that was prepared for a long time. Many of them don't have access to social networks or to TV channels, and so many things that people in the West, in the United States, for example, think are obvious are simply not known to these people. And but they are still very good people. They are still trying to do their best to also to stop this conflict. And so what I would call for is for everyone just to examine their hearts and to pay attention, as not to hate people beforehand, before knowing, because right now many people are demonizing Russians, thinking that we are possessed by the devil or something like this. This is not true, of course. And so I hope that that this informational bubble will certainly burst after some time, and then some more information eventually will be available for everyone. Not only for the people in Russia about what's going on in the world and in Ukraine, but also the other way around.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing this perspective with us, Father Kirill.
Thank you very much.
Polish bishops gathering in Warsaw for their 391st plenary meeting this week released a statement condemning Russia's invasion and attacks directed against civilians. They also asked all the faithful to fervently pray for peace in Ukraine, combining, if possible, their prayer with fasting. Almost 1,000 Catholic convents located in Poland and Ukraine are offering spiritual, psychological, medical, and material help to the refugees of this conflict. Religious sisters are organizing housing in more than 500 of their convents for thousands of families, adults, and children, according to the Council of Major Superiors of Congregations of Women Religious. Sisters have prepared and distribute hot meals, clothing, blankets, serve as translators, and assist newcomers in finding work in Poland. As you know, many of our colleagues at EWTN Ukraine have stayed with the Ukrainian people during the Russian invasion. I spoke with Father Diego Saez Martin, a former director of EWTN Ukraine, who currently works in Rome, about his work in Ukraine and contact with those in the war zone. Father Diego, thank you so much for speaking with us. I know it's hard that your former colleagues are still in a war zone. Have you been in touch with them over WhatsApp?
Sure. Almost every day I'm in contact with my brothers and the co-workers of EWTN in Ukraine. And they tell me about the situation, about how they work now. And it is really difficult. They have to quit Kiev, the capital, because the area where our office is situated in the capital was under shelling during the last 2 weeks. So they have to move to another city and to bring with themselves the most necessary equipment in order to continue the broadcasting or our programs in EWTN Ukraine. And
are they safe? Are they able to tell you where they are now?
They are in Typher. This is a city, something like 250 kilometers from the capital to the west of the country. Situation there is better. It is not one of the main cities of the country, but they have good internet connection, and it allows them to continue broadcasting. And we have some facility there, Oblates of Mary Immaculate. This is our congregation. We run the office of EWTN in Ukraine. And we have a big building there, a big religious house, Marian shrine. So they have plenty of rooms for working and preparing some kind of rooms as a studio for EWTN. And they try to record many witnesses from the people. This big building, this big shrine, is a place where many people are taking refuge. They are fleeing from Kiev and other major cities in the country, and this shrine provides them some kind of refuge. And they try to record these witnesses from the people, and they hear very dramatic stories every day.
I'm sure you could never have imagined the kind of impact that EWTN in Ukraine would have. Can you tell us, you told us a little bit about what's going on with refugees there, but can you tell us about the programmatic impact? What are you actually transmitting?
Well, first thing they are trying to continue broadcasting masses, because in many different places of the country, people cannot go to the religious services because, first thing, there is no transportation system. They are under shelling in a lot of countries, in a lot of cities and towns of the country, the entire country, and they cannot go to the religious services. Second thing, there is also some kind of restrictions for the movements from the government. So even for a couple of days, sometimes it happens that for a couple of days people cannot go out from the houses for the sake of their own security, because the city is under selling at that moment, on those days. So one of the priorities is providing access to the prayers and to the religious services through our programs, through our station. Then they record also many messages from the bishops, our bishops, trying to give hope and strengthen the faith of the people. And also they try also to explain the different situations, like, for example, what is sin, the consequences of the sin that brings us this consequences of destruction and violence. So they try to explain in depth the reasons of this war, and of course they also broadcast beautiful witnesses of people welcoming refugees and all the humanitarian aid coming from different countries of the world. They also share through our broadcasts the different witnesses from people from all around the world, sending messages, encouraging Ukrainians to preserve, to keep firm in the faith and having hope that everything will be okay with the help of God. So this is what they are trying to do in the difficult conditions they can develop their mission right now.
And Father Diego, you're in Rome right now. Italy is also receiving refugees. Have you been in contact with any of them?
I am in contact with some of the families I knew when I was in Ukraine. Some of their children came here to Rome, and now these children are were trying to bring their families in the large sense of the world, not only the father and the mother, but also some kind of relatives, friends, neighbors. So yes, I'm in touch with them. Situation is also difficult because to get the border for going out from the country, they have to pass through many different checkpoints along the highways and the high roads leading to the border, and then there is a lot of bureaucracy, and so it is not difficult. But thanks God, many of them managed to bring their families here to Rome or to other parts of Italy. But some of them are still trying to have their families safe in other countries here in Italy, or even in other countries I know they are living now, these people I met in Ukraine when I was working there.
And Father Diego, this is a paramount moment. This is the moment when the Holy Father is really leaning in. Do you see any hopes of positive feedback from Russia in favor of peace because of that?
What can I tell you is that many people during the last weeks told me that they feel some kind of supernatural action from God and from Our Lady. They feel some presence that goes beyond what we can see with our eyes, beyond what it is material. And they believe that the prayers of all people around the world, sending them messages that I am praying for you, this brings them strength, courage, and hope. And this is why they can still fighting for their own freedom and for the future of their children. So I'm really convinced that the spiritual power of our prayers these days, and especially the day when the Holy Father will consecrate Russia and Ukraine too to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, will be an occasion that can change the situation. Yes, I believe so. I am convinced. Maybe if it will not happen the same day of the consecration, but I am sure that all our prayers will be listened. That's, yes, my conviction, my personal conviction, based on the witness of the people I know in Ukraine and what they told me these days.
Well, I know that our viewers join you in that conviction and in those prayers. Thank you so much, Father Diego.
Thank you, and pray for Ukraine.
Absolutely. And a message now from the current Director General of EWTN Ukraine. We talked with Father Alexander Zelinsky from Kyiv on this program 2 weeks ago. Now, his direct video appeal for your continued prayers.
Dear brothers and sisters, dear friends, first of all, I want to say thank you for your prayers for us, for your support, which we really experience during this very difficult time for us, for our country, for our nation, during this time of war. We here in Ukraine experience now many sufferings. We experience, I can say, some way of the cross, but we believe that we are not alone, that God is with us, that many people are with us. We experience as Ukrainians that we are very united during this time. We experience also this helpfulness of different people, different countries in the world. So I still want to ask you, please pray for us. We try to pray also for our enemies as God asked us, because this is really Christianity. Also praying for those who need the conversion of heart. Thank you. Thank you for your prayer, for being with us, for your solidarity. May God bless you.
Our prayers indeed for Ukraine and for our EWTN Ukraine colleagues working so hard to follow God's mission and provide comfort and care to the faithful. EWTN News In Depth continues with our special reporting series, What Will Happen If the Supreme Court Overturns Roe v. Wade? We'll be right back.
Pro-life leaders in the Great Lakes states say Michigan is facing its greatest pro-life battle ever. Details coming up.
A unique situation in Michigan, the pro-abortion efforts to bypass an anti-abortion law on the books there for more than a century. Our reporting series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States, is next.
We have a great legal and legislative foundation for the unborn in Michigan, and that's why we are being targeted.
In a state that has a long-standing pre-Roe abortion ban, Michigan's pro-life movement gears up for a fight should the U.S. Supreme Court overturn Roe v. Wade. Welcome back to EWTN News In Depth. Our exclusive series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States, looks at what could happen in some key states after the High Court announces its ruling in the Dobbs case later this year. Our team of reporters, Mark Irons, Catherine Hadro, and Teresa Tomio, are coming to you across the country. Our targets, California, Tennessee, Michigan, Florida, Maryland, and Vermont. This week, Michigan. It's just one of a handful of states in the U.S. with a pre-Roe abortion ban. But pro-abortion forces are working hard to get 425,000 signatures to derail that longtime law if Roe vanishes. Reporter Teresa Tomio explains in our special series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States.
That's correct. I think we're ground zero, because what's happening here in Michigan is really the template for what other states are going to be facing and are facing if, as we anticipate the Supreme Court reversing Roe v. Wade.
Moral theologian and longtime pro-life leader Dr. Monica Miller insisting all eyes are on Michigan because of a 19th century law that was reaffirmed in 1931, a law that bans abortion.
It's still a real law. So, should the Supreme Court reverse Roe v. Wade, which throws the abortion issue back to the states, the individual states, Michigan is a sanctuary state automatically. Abortion would be outlawed in Michigan automatically.
To try and prevent that from happening, Planned Parenthood of Michigan has joined with the American Civil Liberties Union and other pro-abortion organizations to form the Reproductive Freedom for All campaign. Organizers of that effort did not respond to our request for an interview, but according to their website, they do need to collect at least 425,000 petition signatures by July in hopes of getting an amendment on the ballot in November. Miller, along with Genevieve Martin, the legislative director for Right to Life of Michigan, point to the amendment's very broad language, which states, every individual has a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which entails the right to make and effectuate decisions about all matters relating to pregnancy, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion care, miscarriage management, and infertility care.
So they throw everything in there, which is, of course, to confuse the voter. Oh, my miscarriage management is at stake? My prenatal treatments and doctor visits that's of course ridiculous. Nobody, not even sterilizations and contraception is being attacked.
Everything in the kitchen sink. It is the broadest, most vague, it's a mess. Really, that language is a disaster. You have a constitutional right to sterilization. What exactly does that mean? Will school teachers be able to take 13-year-olds in and have them sterilized without their parents' knowledge or permission, for example? That is one of the things that we're looking at is would this law provide for something like that?
The pro-life pushback, however, is already underway with major pro-life groups, including the Michigan Catholic Conference and Knights of Columbus, Right to Life of Michigan, Citizens for a Pro-Life Society, Lutherans for Life, and many other pro-life organizations, a total of some 12 groups coming together. They're engaged in a major educational campaign that will be door-to-door, online, in parishes and other areas as well.
We are working on a decline to sign effort. You can find information on our website about that effort, about what this constitutional amendment would do with regard to parental rights, about women's safety, and about our values as Michiganders.
The Archbishop of Detroit, Alan Vigneron, also sending out a letter to all parishes pointing to the serious nature of the petition and encouraging Catholics to increase support and involvement in pro-life outreach. To sign this petition, he said, would be to actively participate in the promotion of the great evil of abortion. When we reject this proposal and any other efforts in support of abortion, we must simultaneously commit ourselves to creating and supporting clear and realistic alternatives that serve to protect and benefit both mother and child. According to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, there were nearly 30,000 abortions performed in 2019, the Centers for Disease Control ranking Michigan 8th in the country in terms of the numbers of abortions. Despite those high numbers, the Great Lakes state is still considered, according to pro-life leaders, to be one of the strongest pro-life states. Michigan is home to 150 pregnancy resource centers, compared to 26 abortion facilities, and in addition to the 1931 abortion ban, also has several other safety protocols in place, including informed consent measures, parental consent measures, a 24-hour waiting period, coercive abortion prevention, and abortion complication reporting necessary for doctors. Michigan pro-life attorney Rebecca Kiesling, who also serves as president of Save the One, a ministry supporting men and women conceived in rape, says all the strong pro-life measures, including the abortion ban still on the books, need to be protected because she knows firsthand they save lives.
It was the 1846 law and the 1931 laws here in Michigan which protected me, no exceptions. And I literally owe my birth to those laws which protected me because my birth mother's choice was to abort me at the time.
And despite the current pro-life challenges, Kiesling is optimistic that if pro-lifers join together, they can not only prevent the abortion amendment from moving forward, but continue to build on the state's strong pro-life foundation. A similar broad-based ecumenical coalition successfully defeating an assisted suicide measure back in the late 1990s.
I think we just have to keep, hitting hard, raise awareness, and tell people that, it's more critical now more than ever to vote pro-life. Educate your families, definitely start with your families, and then get active on social media and start to talk about wherever you can.
In Lansing, Michigan, I'm Teresa Tomeo for EWTN News In Depth.
Joining us to further discuss the unique circumstances in Michigan is the Multicultural Outreach Director of Right to Life Michigan, Tina Typher. Tina, your organization Right to Life Michigan is part of a broader network of national Right to Life groups. Is there any cross-state coordination?
Yes, there is a lot of coordination and cooperation between our organization and the other Right to Life organizations around the country. Our president, Barbara Listing, who is just an amazing national pro-life leader, she sits on the board of the National Right to Life, and so there is that cooperation. But beyond that, we work together with the other organizations to, we share media, we share ideas, we help each other with legislation and just connecting with resources and so forth. It's not uncommon that we would have visitors from other Right to Life organizations in our state office, just coming around to see how we do things since our organization has been very successful.
And this new bill talking about legislators and visits being pushed by abortion advocates in Michigan has no restrictions on who can aid a woman in exercising her right to abortion. Doesn't this have consequences for human trafficking, domestic violence, and incest?
Yes, it has grave consequences. This proposed constitutional amendment has language that is so broad-reaching and confusing that it would actually allow for an abuser to, if, say, their victim became pregnant as a result of the abuse, it would allow that abuser to order the abortion pill through the mail, get the pill, have the woman take it, end that pregnancy, and then just continue the abuse. And the other part of it is the language in this amendment. It makes it, I will read it to you. It says, the state shall not penalize, prosecute, or otherwise take adverse action against an individual based on their actual, potential, perceived, or alleged pregnancy outcomes. So the state shall not penalize. Law enforcement, even if they would become aware of a crime against a woman that was covered up, a crime of sex trafficking or abuse, they would probably not report it for fear of breaching the Constitution.
Well, you do multicultural outreach. I know that minorities play a big role in this discussion over abortion. And this year's theme for Black History Month was Black Health and Wellness. Aside from advocating for the life of unborn minorities, which I know you do a lot of, how else do you and your community support minorities at risk for abortion, the women and the families?
Well, Michigan has a great support system for women in unplanned pregnancies. Right to Life of Michigan has over 80 affiliates all throughout the state of Michigan. So all the way from the Upper Peninsula, all the way down to the bottom of the mitten, there are people there that are a support system. There are 150 pregnancy resource centers throughout the state. And you know what those do, they take care of women in so many ways who are in need of that help. And our website, which is rtl.org, has a listing of all of those. So if a woman is in need of any kind of pregnancy help, she can go and put in her area code and find help right near her. We also have a website called Help in the D, and this lists other help resources for the areas around Metro Detroit. And these are, when I say other, I mean resources beyond what a pregnancy resource center would provide. So if a woman is facing an unplanned pregnancy, she may think, pregnancy center, they'll help me, you know, through my pregnancy and once the baby is born, just for a little bit, but then what am I going to do, right? She might not have housing, health care, she might need counseling. And so Help in the D is, like I said, a separate website, and it lists all those extra resources to help beyond just the childbirth. Also, within the Black community, we work to raise awareness. Abortion is not something that is discussed very freely. And so when a young woman finds herself in an unplanned pregnancy, her first thought might be abortion because she hasn't heard anyone talking about the resources that are there and the support system and so forth. So we work within the community to raise awareness. And we also, this is the biggest part of our work within the African American community, we educate. We start with the youngest of the kids, and we teach them that they are valuable and they're loved. They are a unique and unrepeatable human being. We teach them fun fetal development facts. We tell them the day you were born was not the first day of your life. You were alive while you were inside your mom's womb. And so we try to just start there and build that confidence and through education.
And Tina, last question. We heard in the package that explained this issue with Teresa that the Catholic Church is a great partner in advocating for life. Are there other groups or other religious leaders that are leaning into this?
As a part of our multicultural outreach, we actually work in the Chaldean community. And so the Chaldean Catholic Church, they help as well. And as you said, the Catholic Church here in Michigan our Archbishop Alan Vigneron. They are great allies in our pro-life movement here in Michigan.
Well, we wish you well as you try to do your best to protect life. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you so much.
Next week, we head to Tennessee. Reporter Mark Irons visits a state with a strong pro-life movement, tours a mobile pregnancy unit in Nashville, and finds out more about the trigger ban that would go into effect if the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe. Mark explains in part 4 of our series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States. And to see more of our coverage from prior weeks on the states of Maryland and Florida, check out our EWTN News In Depth social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more clips on YouTube. Ahead on EWTN News In Depth, changes to U.S. border policy on immigration, who it will impact. Praying in the pews or at home. A look at church attendance post-COVID lockdowns is next. And a beautiful show of faith and devotion, praying for Our Lady to intercede in a matter of life and death ahead. This month marks 2 years since cities worldwide implemented mandatory lockdowns in an effort to stop the spread of COVID-19. Work, school, and church attendance drastically dropped. The separation from the sacraments was particularly painful for the Catholic faithful. Now, as lockdowns have lifted, Mark Irons checks in to find out if the pews are filling up again in this Catholic Life report.
COVID or no COVID, for Catholics, in-person worship has always remained essential.
Even though God is everywhere, He is present in a surpassing, substantial manner at every Mass.
2 years since the global outbreak of COVID-19, Father Paul Scalia, pastor of St. James in Falls Church, Virginia, believes his parishioners have mostly returned to Sunday Mass.
I think we're back to pre-pandemic levels.
Not far from here in the nation's capital, people from around the country are visiting the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. This is the largest Catholic church in North America, and things have returned to normal. No more restrictions, mask or social distancing required. But there was a time not so long ago when restrictions and closures affected all U.S. Catholics.
Definitely during those first few months, back in March of 2020, very, the lowest levels ever, in physical Mass attendance.
Tracking data on Catholics for 2 decades, Dr. Mark Gray with the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate says before COVID broke out, around 1/4 of U.S. Catholics attended Mass regularly on Sundays. Now, he says those numbers are coming back.
And Mass attendance has, at least in our surveys, has returned back to pre-pandemic levels.
But examined regionally, there's more nuance. Through analysis of annual surveys from his group, the Catholic Leadership Institute, CEO Dan Cellucci says Sunday attendance remains down in some places by 20 to 35% from 2019 numbers.
I do think it necessitates a real urgent response on the part of our parishes to be developing relationship and reaching out to people.
Cellucci says parishes in places with greater COVID restrictions, such as the Northeast and California, may not be seeing a full return at this point, as opposed to areas with fewer restrictions. And relationship building was key.
And so what we saw is that parishes that were really focused more on relationship with their community, that they were calling them during the pandemic, that they were kind of really present in people's lives, those are the parishes that are now back maybe at full capacity prior to the pandemic.
Due to health concerns when COVID first hit, bishops removed something that has always been in effect, a church obligation for Catholics to go to Mass on Sunday. But since last year, some have reinstated the obligation, calling on Catholics to come back. Others have been more cautious. The Archdiocese of Santa Fe says the Sunday Mass obligation remains suspended. There is no obligation to attend Sunday Mass in church until further notice. In Florida, Archbishop Thomas Winsky of Miami says there have been concerns about the elderly and retirees in the state. He says his archdiocese has used precautions to keep people safe.
Nobody had ever reported that they got sick because they went to Mass.
Winsky told EWTN News In Depth that he will designate Palm Sunday as the return of the Sunday obligation in his archdiocese.
I'm doing that Palm Sunday because that gives everybody a few weeks to prepare.
Father Scalia explains that if someone has a legitimate medical reason, they aren't obligated to go to Mass, but reminds Catholics why Mass is essential.
that obligation is there for a very good reason, to make sure that we do what is best for us. And what will bestow on us really our identity as Catholics, right, is setting aside that time to worship Him.
Mark Irons, EWTN News in Depth.
The people Mark spoke with also said that financial contributions to the church have taken a hit as people have been slow to come back to Mass. After the break, the Week in Review. Coming up on EWTN News in Depth, lawmakers in one Latin American country shelve a controversial law aimed at preventing abortions, and why one European diocese is allowing lay people to confer baptisms. The Federal Reserve takes action to combat inflation. That story tops the Week in Review. This week, Fed Chair Jerome Powell announced a hike in interest rates for the first time in 3 years, up 0.25%.
We understand that high inflation imposes significant hardship, especially on those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation.
By raising its benchmark short-term interest rate, the Fed hopes to tackle what is now the highest rate of inflation in 40 years. But the hike will mean higher loan rates for consumers and businesses.
Getting loans, getting refinancing, getting your first mortgage is going to be a lot harder as these interest rates go higher. If you have, excessive credit card balances, you really want to try to address that and get that down as fast as possible.
The Fed said it will continue to try to nudge the economy in the right direction and plans 6 additional incremental rate hikes this year. In Texas, nearly 23,000 mail-in ballots were rejected because of one of the state's new voting laws requiring more identification, according to the Associated Press. Voters are required to include a partial Social Security number or driver's license number on ballots. Officials say many voters didn't realize the new rules and were tripped up. Voting groups say the elderly and disabled were the most affected. State leaders are planning better voter education efforts ahead of the general election in November. The Biden administration partially ended a Trump-era border policy for children. Title 42 allowed U.S. officials to expel migrants over public health concerns related to the spread of COVID in immigrant detention facilities. The Biden administration had already exempted minors, but a court ruling in Texas last week would have forced expulsion for unaccompanied minors. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention terminated part of a public health order called Title 42 as it relates to unaccompanied minors arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. Single adults and families could still be turned away. Terrifying video showing the impact of a 7.4 earthquake that rocked Japan on Wednesday night. At least 4 people died and more than 100 are injured. It caused a high-speed train to derail, damaged homes and buildings, and left millions without power. The epicenter of the quake was just off the coast of Fukushima, an area hit 11 years ago that resulted in a nuclear power plant meltdown.
El presidente de ustedes.
Guatemala's Congress voted this week to shelve a controversial abortion law they passed last week that increased prison sentences for women convicted of terminating their pregnancies from 3 years to 10 years. It also prohibited same-sex marriage and banned the discussion of sexual diversity in schools. Guatemala's President Alejandro Giammattei threatened a veto of the law because some elements were considered unconstitutional and in violation of international treaties Guatemala has signed. The German Catholic Diocese of Essen has commissioned 17 women and 1 man to administer baptisms amid a shortfall of priests. Bishop Franz Joseph Overbeck says they are commissioned for a period of 3 years to assist during a pastorally difficult situation. Canon law indicates that when a minister is absent or impeded, another person designated by the local ordinary or in case of necessity can confer a baptism. And good news if you like the outdoors. The U.S. Senate has passed a bill to make daylight saving permanent. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida sponsored the so-called Sunshine Protection Act. It's not yet known if the House will take up the bill, which is necessary before President Biden can sign it into law. If that does happen, the change wouldn't go into effect until next November of 2023 because transportation schedules have already been built out through this year. After the break, we bring you a look at Catholics living out their faith very publicly with a devotion to Our Lady. And considered for sainthood, the legacy of two Catholics who made the ultimate sacrifice, as we look at the state of living Catholic in Pakistan. This week marks a somber anniversary, the death of Akash Bashir, who gave his life protecting the faith in Pakistan. The Vatican has declared Bashir and another Catholic Pakistani, Shahbaz Bhatti, servants of God. Catholics account for less than 1% of the more than 200 million people in Pakistan. Reporter Rizal Reyes gives us a look at the sacrifices of these men and the state of Catholicism in Pakistan today.
Living in fear, discriminated against because of their views, growing up learning not to speak out or risk being imprisoned or even worse, killed. This is the grim reality of religious minorities in Pakistan.
We are super-class citizens, and the Christian and other religious minorities are our servants and they are second-class citizens.
Peter Bhatti grew up in the rural village of Kushpur, dubbed Pakistan's Vatican City due to its growing Catholic community. His brother Shahbaz Bhatti, Pakistan's first and only Catholic federal minister, was assassinated in 2011 for being a critic of blasphemy laws.
My brother gave his life for oppressed and marginalized people of Pakistan.
It's been 11 years since he was gunned down in front of his mother's home in Islamabad, and there is still no justice for his killers. Bhatti's story is just one of many reported acts of violence against religious minorities in Pakistan, and they remain a target in the majority Muslim country. In the years since Bhatti's death, violent extremism has spiked. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom labels Pakistan as a country of particular concern. According to USCIRF's latest report, there was a sharp increase in targeted killings, blasphemy cases, forced conversions, and hate speech targeting religious minorities. In 2020 alone, there were 30 Christians, including 7 on death row, jailed in Pakistan on charges of blasphemy. Knox Thames, a friend of Shahbaz Bhatti and former State Department Special Advisor, says Pakistan has the worst blasphemy laws in the world.
That's the notorious distinction of having more people in jail for the so-called crime of blasphemy than any other country times 3. So there are Christians, there are other minorities who are sentenced to jail for years and years, their life incredibly disrupted over false allegations. Now there's a virus of violent extremism that is plaguing the country and is victimizing every community.
Another victim of violence is Akash Bashir, a devout young Catholic who, like others in his country, is often persecuted for his religion. Now the Vatican has declared him servant of God after he sacrificed his life to protect Catholic worshippers. He is now in the beginning stages of canonization. On March 15, 2015, Sunday Mass was being celebrated in the majority Christian neighborhood of Yuhanabad. Bashir was standing guard at the entrance to St. John's Catholic Church when a man armed with explosives tried to enter the church. Bashir didn't budge, reportedly saying, "I will die, but I will not let you go in." The suicide bomber blew himself up and Akash was killed instantly. But by blocking the entrance to a filled church, he saved hundreds in the process. Like Bhatti, Bashir's bravery and ultimate sacrifice was seen as an act of love for his people and his religion. Bhatti said amid the ongoing crisis, the Catholic Church has served as a beacon of hope in Pakistan.
Don't lose the hope. Pakistan is our country. Our forefathers give their life for this country, for their prosperity. They have a lot of contribution. So we are not going to give up.
Rizal Reyes, EWTN News in Depth.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to tune in next week to catch more of our exclusive series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States, as we head to Tennessee. And before we leave you, we take you to Poland for an inspiring act of faith in our Images of the Week. Praising Our Lady in public, dozens of men in Poland take part in a public rosary right in the middle of the street in Warsaw. Kneeling on the stone pavement with beads in their hands, they recite each decade together on every first Saturday of the month. It happens in various cities across Poland and has been occurring for several years, but they have now made their intention praying for peace in Ukraine. What a beautiful act of love and devotion to our Blessed Mother, and a beautiful witness to our Catholic faith.
Święta Maryjo, Matko Boża, módl się za nami grzesznymi, teraz i w godzinę śmierci.